What is so remarkable, in fact, astounding, about the Mandelbrot set is that although it's infinitely complex, it's based on incredibly simple principles, unlike almost everything in modern mathematics. In fact, anybody who can add and multiply can understand the principles on which it's based. You don't even have to subtract or divide, still less use logarithms or trigonometrical functions to comprehend how the Mandelbrot set is created. In fact, in principle, it could have been discovered any time in human history and not merely in 1980. But the problem is this: although it's only based on adding and multiplying, you have to carry out those operations millions, billions of times to create a complete set. And that's why it was not discovered until the era of modern computers. It was on the 1st of March, 1980, at IBM's Thomas J. Watson Research Center in upstate New York that Benoit Mandelbrot first glimpsed the M-set. The seeds of this discovery were, in fact, some decades before the M-set was first seen. In Paris, in 1917, a mathematician called Gaston Julia published papers connected with so-called complex numbers. The results of his endeavors eventually became known as Julia sets, although Julia himself never saw a Julia set. He could only guess at them, and it wouldn't be until the advent of modern computers that Julia sets could be seen for the first time.
For me, the first step, almost, in a difficult mathematical problem was to program it and see how it looked like. We started programming Julia sets of all kinds. It was extraordinarily great fun. And in particular, at one point, we became interested in Julia set of the simplest possible transformation. Z goes to Z squared plus C. So Z times Z plus C. I made many pictures of it. First of all, the first one was very rough. But the very rough picture, that was not the answer. Each rough picture asked a question, so I made another picture, another picture, another picture. And then observations came up. For example, initially we had this Julia set as a big black blob, people called it bug, and then when the bug became more precisely drawn, there was all kinds of junk around it. Now, the junk might have been anything. For example, part of the junk was just a very poor computer system we had. In fact, it was a miserable system. So what we did was to act like a naturalist, like somebody 18th century botanist or zoologist. You take a microscope and look closer to see what happens. So we looked at some of these little pieces of junk by magnifying the Mandelbrot set, and they vanished because they were just junk. And others did not vanish. So as we did it, something quite extraordinary came up, which is that if you magnify a small piece of the Mandelbrot set, that piece looks like Julia set itself. So the whole Julia set has a kind of, say, miniature version of itself in the Mandelbrot set. And after a few weeks, we had this very strong, overwhelming impression that this was a kind of big bear we have encountered. I think the most important implication is that from very simple formulas you can get very complicated results. It's fundamental from viewpoint of the very base of science, because what is science? We have all this mess around us, things are totally incomprehensible, and then eventually, more or less rapidly, more or less hard to achieve, we find simple laws, simple formulas. In a way, a very simple formula, Newton's law, which is just also a few symbols, can, by hard work, explain the motion of planets around the sun and many, many other things to the 15th decimal. It's marvelous. A very simple formula explains all these very complicated things.
There's an interesting parallel with the equation that almost everybody is familiar with, the only equation almost everybody is familiar with, E equals mc squared, Albert Einstein's equation that says matter and energy are equivalent to each other. That was a very simple equation with very far-reaching consequences. And the equation for the Mandelbrot set is equally simple. Z equals Z squared plus C.
The letters in the Mandelbrot equation stand for numbers, unlike those in Einstein's equation where they stand for physical quantities, mass, velocity, energy. The Mandelbrot numbers are coordinates, positions on the plane, defining the location of a spot. Another difference from Einstein's equation, and a very important one, is this double arrow. It's a kind of two-way traffic sign. The numbers flow in both directions, constantly feeding back on themselves. This process of going round and round a loop is called iteration. It's rather like a dog chasing its own tail. The output of one operation becomes the input of the other, and so on and on and on. When the Mandelbrot equation is given a number representing a point, and that number is iterated through the equation, one of two things happen. Either the number gets bigger and bigger and shoots off to infinity, or it shrinks to zero. Depending on which happens, the computer then knows where to draw a boundary line. So what we get from this basic iteration is a kind of map, dividing this world into two distinct territories. Outside of it are all the numbers that have the freedom of infinity. Inside it, numbers that are prisoners, trapped and doomed to ultimate extinction.
Think of a computer screen. You're looking at each individual little element, each pixel of the screen. You pick one of these pixels, you apply this rule lots and lots of times, and either the pixel moves off and disappears completely from view, or it moves in towards a fixed point in the middle of the screen. And what you do is, you just want to distinguish between going off out to infinity or going into zero. So any point that moves into zero when you apply this rule, you colour that point black. And any point that goes off to infinity, what people tend to do is colour it all sorts of wonderful rainbow hues about how fast it goes away. The important bit's the black bit in the middle. That's all the stuff that doesn't escape when you keep applying this rule.
Now, the colours are completely arbitrary. They could be anything, but they are not meaningless. A very good analogy is the contour map, you'll see, of a mountain range, for example, where the contours are drawn and coloured, the areas are coloured. The highest areas might be coloured white, then brown, then green, and then if you went on into the sea, deeper and deeper blues, just to show where the various levels occur. So it's the same here. You can make the colours anything you like, but they do define the different areas of calculation. And you can change them and get the most gorgeous results. Just look at this. Now, you may think that the frontiers are moving, but there's no motion whatsoever. Only the colors are cycling, in or out. Nothing is moving.
When you get very, very fine to very, very small details, the variations can become of overwhelming complexity. So complex that no single picture can possibly give justice to them. It's impossible in a black and white or color picture to show how complicated it is. The only way is to use what we call the color cycle. That is, the colors change regularly, and each set of colors in a way reveals a different property of these variations, a different variation. So by having